Oh, that's what. Oh, really?
That's what he did to me. He didn't speak.
Okay, I think we're up to Mitri va'adoimi einen asurin. A Mitri and Adoimi are only asur for 3 doiris, but both Zacharim and the Kavis are asur. However, the Amoni is asur forever, although the Amoni is mutter from day one. So what happened is Reb Shimon said, I have a kal v'chomer to prove that by a Mitri and Adoimi, the noshim should be mutter. Madich Amoni Me'avi, which are very severe prohibitions, because it lasts forever. Never can a Amoni or a Moavi marry into Klal Yisrael. Nevertheless, still their noshim are mutter. A Mitzri, which even in worst case scenario only lasts 3 generations, surely its women should be mutter right away. The Chachamim said, I don't think so. That's not the halacha. So they said we have. You can go straight. We should go very slow till you see that it's paid. We have a tshuva to your chayv. We have a tshuva to your kal v'chomer. We could slug up your kal v'chomer. So now the Gemara wants to know what was the upslug that the Chachamim had in mind for this kal v'chomer. Zog to Gemara, my tshuva, Amar Rabba bar Rav Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum de'ikol meimar, Arai shechichu. Bring a rye from all arayis. We know that when your mother is also to you, your grandmother is also to you. So that's just 3 generations up. 3 generations up, midaraisa, and it's 3 generations down midaraisa. So arai shechichu shaloi also bahem ella at shloisha doiros. Arai midaraisa. Only 3 generations are usher, and it's echad zachar and echad nekevos. So you see, the fact that it's only relevant for 3 generations isn't a reason why it should not apply to nekevos, because arayis only apply for 3 generations, yet it applies the issues for men and for women. Zok to Gemara, Zok Shimon, that's not a good raya. Mal arayis shekain kares. The reason why Arias, Asers, the Nekevos, is because Arias has an Isser Chorus. Mashenk in a Mitri or in a Doimi does not have an Isser Chorus. Dr. Gemara, Mamzer Yechiach. Mamzer has an Isser Chorus. I'm sorry, Mamzer is not an Isser Chorus. Mamzer is only an Isser Lav. And it's also for Sai male and Sai female. The Gemara, Mala Mamzer, that has a different Chumrah. Shekain Eine Roy Lavi Bekahal La'ila. A mamzer could never marry into the kahal, so that's why it will be usher. Size of harm side the cables. Arayis is not usher forever. Because Radin loy roy uzekara uzeh, the loy roy uzekara uzeh, but atzara shavush behen. What does Arayis and mamzer have in common? Shir asurin, they're both usher, and they apply to echad zechar, echad the cables. Af ani avi mitri umitris. Therefore, I should also include a mitri and a mitris. Sheyiu asurim echad zekarim v'echad nekevos. So that was the tiny that the Rabbanan had back to Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon's going to answer, no. Ma la'atzad hashavish behen, both arayis as well as mamzer sheken yesh bo and tzad kares. There was some kares involved. Arayis, the zivug of arayis itself has kares, and mamzer. Although living with a mamzer doesn't give you a chiv, it's only chiv lav, but the mamzer only came into existence because of an isser kares. So therefore, you don't have a raya to mitri and a doimi. So Rab Shimon's kal v'chomer is maintained that madich. You say amoni v'lo amonis. Surely you should say mitri v'lo mitris. Zog to Gemara, Rabbanan, how is the Rabbanan going to deal with that? Mechalal d'chai v'yasei. Uchor beloz ben Yaakov. If there's an Isra say, where is there an Isra say? By Kuna, it says, Kim besula me'ama v'kachisha. The mitzvah doesn't allow to marry a be'ula. There's no lav on that. It's merely an Isra. Does that become a halala? As such, a child become a halola or not. So according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, even though it's an Isra say, it still becomes a halola. So the Rabbanon's response to Rabbi Shimon is, I have a raya from Chai V'Sev Chalola. By Chalola, it's Osir. Sai males, Sai females are Osir, and there's only an Isra say, who adin the Mitzri and the Doimi, which is also an Isra say, should be Osir Sai Noshim, Sai Noshim, and Sai Noshim. Let's see Rashi. V'Rabbanon, I'm looking 6 lines down in the wide lines. V'Rabbanon d'Amar Yeshuva, Parchen Leila Rab Shimon, this is the kasha they're going to ask on Rab Shimon to slug up his Kal V'Chomer. Mechalal d'Chai V'Yaseh, Kigoyin, for instance, Kohen Gadol Shenasa Anusa Emufuta. So Kohen Gadol married a Ba'ula. There's no law for him to marry such a woman. It's only an Aseh, She Allah B'Aseh, because it says, Ki im Besula Me'ama V'Yikach Isha, V'Loi Ba'ula. There's no Isra Zoina, because we hold upon the Abala Pnuya is not a Zoina. The Lekalaman Amar is Pnuya is Nusi El Rebbe Lozer. We don't pass him like that. So let's think about it. You have a woman, a Kohen Gadol married a woman, and he was only also to marry her because of an Isra say. The Rebbe Elazar ben Yaakov also, and Rebbe Elazar ben Yaakov said on Dafsam Machalaf and Beis that Avlat Chalal, even though there's only an Isra say, it still makes the child into a chalal. So now let's go through the whole shakla v'tayah that occurred between the Shimon and the Rabban. The Rab Shimon made a Kal V'Chomer. Madach Amoni, V'lo Amonis, and the Amoni is also forever. Surely Mitzri V'lo Mitzris, because a Mitzri is only also for 3 days. V'havi Parchalei Rabban and the Rab Shimon. So how did the Rabban slug up this Kal V'Chomer? They said Arayis Shechichu. Arayis brings a raya that even though it's only also for 3 days, it's still also size charim inside the cables. On that, Reb Shimon asked, Malai Rayish, Shekain Kares. The reason why a Rayish, you're chayiv both on the Ish and on the Isha, is because it's very chomer, there's a chiv Kares. And on that, the Chachamim answered, Halal, the chayiv. Because when God was over in the say, that's going to be a raya. Why? She'ain by Kares. There's no Isra Kares. There's only an Isra say for a Kohen Gadol to marry a B'ula. And nevertheless, Vasura Bas Keben, and the daughter born from such a union will be also to marry a Kohen. So the Shimon might ask back, Mal Halal Shekein Tzirasa Ba'Avera. A halal was created through an Avera. Lefichach also Nekevis Kazvacharim. On that Arayis Shechichu Shein Tzirasa Ba'Avera. Arayis, each individual of this couple that were over the Arayis, they themselves were not created by Avera. Nevertheless, and still 3 generations are also. So therefore, if you hold like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that a halal is made by a Chai V'Yaseh, then you have an upshot to Rab Shimon's Kal V'Chomer. Zokt Gemara, Umay Loiki. Shimon responded back to the Rabbanan, Loiki, you don't have a good upshot. Zokt Gemara, Hachika Amarlu. This is what Rab Shimon was telling the Rabbanan. I don't hold like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. So you cannot say halal mechai v'yaseh yechichu, because there is no halal from mechai v'yaseh. But lididchu, the sphere luchu, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, even if you hold like Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, it doesn't make a difference, because you cannot ask me any kashas called svara. No kashas can be asked upon me, because halacha ani oimer. I'm saying over a halacha that I have Kabbalah from my parents and grandparents. And therefore, that's something that no raya would change, like we learned yesterday when it came to Amoni B'lo Amonis, that he heard it from the peasant of Shmuel, and once you hear it Mikabala, even if you have a svara to change that, it doesn't change. Zok Gemara weiter. Tanya, Amalan Reb Shimon, we have a brisa that tells us more information about Reb Shimon's response to the Rabbanon. He said, Allah Chani, first of all, I'm not backing down, because this is the Kabbalah that I have. I actually have support from the pasuk itself, because when it says that a Mitri cannot marry into Klal Yisrael, it says Bonim Asher Yivoldu, the third door is allowed to come into the kahal. It's focusing on bonim, on sons. Bonim v'lei bonos, the way the pasuk even describes the isser of a mitri and a daimi is using the word bonim, which indicates that it's only an isser for the males. Zok the Bryce, Tanur Rabbanon. Bonim v'lei bonos. Divrei Rab Shimon.
Yosy.
Shimon holds, yes.
But there is no way to say children other than bonim.
Can you say that again?
There's no other way to say children except for the word bonim. So there's no, that's not a raya.
You're saying how else could it have said it?
Right.
I think it could have skipped out the word completely. I think it could have said, because if you look at the pasuk itself, let's see if we can find the pasuk here at the side. Let me see if I can find the pasuk there on my margin. I got to do a margin call. It says, "Bonim asher yivoldu lehem dar shlishi." What it could have said is, "Asher yivoldu lehem dar shlishi yavi lehem b'kal Hashem." It didn't have to say the word bonim at all. The fact that it's stuck in the word bonim seems to indicate that it's only male.
Okay, it seems like it's an integral part of the sentence.
So let's read the Gemara by there. Tanur Rabbanon. Bonim v'lei bonos. Divrei Rab Shimon. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda argues and says, "Harehu omer bonim asher yivoldu lehem dor shlishi." So it says yivoldu. It doesn't just say bonim. It said bonim asher yivoldu. And the Rabbi Yehuda learns from there is a cause of talon beleda. The Torah says that tali and leda, and Rashi tells us that leda means when the keva is nami asurais. Leda includes the kevas, anyone that's born, including in the keva. So that's why Rabbi Yehuda held there's no raya from bonim. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Zok Rabbi Yochanan, an interesting thought. He loved the Amar Rabbi Yehuda that a cause of talon beleda, if it wasn't for the fact that Rabbi Yehuda just spoke out now in this brisa that the Torah says it's tali and leda, we would have a massive problems on our hands. If it wasn't for the fact that nekevos are also usher, a mitzvah, just like a mitzvah, if it wasn't for the fact, we'd have a huge problem. Because without the fact that the female mitzvahs are going to be usher, the mitzvahim, the males, would have no solution to even ever arrive at a dor shlishi. He loved Amar Yehuda because of Torah related to Asher, the female mitzvahs, leimotzi yodav ragel v'esmedrash. We would be stuck. We wouldn't find our hands and feet in the besmedrash, meaning we would be stuck to find a solution for mitzvah males. Why? Even the Amar Mar Kahal Ger Mikri Kahal. It happens to be that Rabbi Yehuda holds that Kal Ger Mikri Kahal, which means that when it says La Yavai B'Kal Hashem, you cannot marry a ger either. So let me turn the page.
Why is that such a big headache? Like, what do we need the mitzvah for exactly?
We're going to see in a second. Let me get to the Amud Beis. We're going to go to 78, Daf 78. So Zok to Gemara, since we're saying so therefore Mitri Sheni b'mayitar. How is it possible to get a Mitri Sheni? It says in the pasuk the Darsh Lishi Yav Bikal. How would you possibly get the Mitri Sheni? Who's he supposed to marry? He can't marry a mistress because a mistress is now called Kahal. So who is he going to marry? There's nobody he can marry. He can't marry a Geyeris. So if he can't marry a Geyeris, who's he going to marry? He's stuck. So he's going to remain stuck as a Mitri. Mitri Sheni b'mayitar. Zoktamor, what are you talking about? I have a simple solution. Dilma, the Avar V'Nosif. How do you get a Mitri Shlishi? He wasn't allowed to marry a mistress. He wasn't allowed to marry a Jewish girl. But he did. He was over. Then you can build a generation. Zoktamor, the pasuk addresses the method of how a Mitri could join Klal Yisrael. Dor Shlishi Yavi Lahen Bakal. The Torah is not going to find a method that's going to involve an Isser. The E, like Asif Kra. The Torah doesn't find methods that are usher to do. For Gemara, what are you talking about? The Torah discusses Isurim. Hare mamzer, it says la yover mamzer v'kal Hashem. That only comes by doing an isser. So you see the Torah discusses the outcome of a virus. Hare mamzer the kosvekra, and the pasuk talks about a mamzer. So the ili surah kosen. Yes, the Torah is going to talk about the repercussions of an avera and what's going to be the impact. That there will be a mamzer born and that mamzer will be osir. But the ili atera lekosen, the Torah is not going to use being over an isser in order to get back into Klal Yisrael. What are you talking about? A person is not allowed to marry his wife, his gerusha, if she married somebody else. But if he did marry her, the pasuk is To'eva he, and we darshan he To'eva, she's a To'eva, the ain boneh To'evit, meaning her children do not become pasul, even though the children from this second union are children from an Isser Lav. So you see it mentions it there. The Torah says if someone takes his wife back, it's a To'eva. And that's what it's trying to tell us. The Isser, that she's a To'eva if she marries him again. Then we make a diuk. That's just agavarcha. That the Torah will do. But the Torah is not going to address only an eitzah for a kula, for a heter that comes from this. Zokt Gemara weiter. Tanu Rabbanim. Im naimar banim lama namar dairos. So what does it say in the pasuk? Banim, referring to Mitzrayim. Banim asher yivaldu lahem, the children that are born to them. Dar shlishi, the third generation. Yavai lahem b'kahal Hashem. So we're going to dissect this pasuk. We're going to focus on what the word banim tells you and what the word asher yivaldu tells you. Then there's two words lahem. We're focusing on both of the lahems and on Dor Shlishi. So we have a lot of items to analyze here. Tanur Abanim. Im Naimer Banim, if it says Banim, Lama Naimer Dairais. Banim means the generations after, 3 generations. It could have said, Banim Asher Yivalda Lahem Shlishi Avai Lahem B'Kal Hashem. Why did it have to say Banim Asher Yivalda Lahem and then stick in Dor? Why do we need to see from the word Dor? Im Naimer Dairais. And if the pasuk wanted to use the word dairos, that's fine as well. But then lama nemar banim. Why did it say banim? It means the same thing. Zokt Gemara, not at all. This is very important. Im noimar banim v'noy nemar dairos. If the pasuk would have only used the word banim and not dairos, I wouldn't have thought it meant generations. I would have thought that if a Mitri marries a Mitris, their first son that's born to them may not marry a Jew. Their second son that's born to them may not marry a Jew. But the third son that's born is allowed to marry a Jew, even though he's in the second generation. That's why it said, the Kachnemer Doira is to tell you that it doesn't mean his first and second son. It means his children from the first generation and his children from the second generation. Zokt Gemara, very good. So then all it needed to say was Doirais. The number Doirais for the number Banim, what would the problem be then? If all it said was Dor Shlishi Avila Makal, I would have said, let's think to ourselves. Who caused problems for the Jews? The Mitzrayim of that generation. So maybe the Torah is telling you the Mitzrayim of that generation and the Mitzrayim of next generation, they're not allowed to marry the Klal Yisrael. But future generations of Mitzrayim who weren't involved in the Egyptian Holocaust, they wouldn't be penalized for marrying into Klal Yisrael. Therefore, L'kach Nemer Banim, to say no matter what generation it is, they have to wait to the third generation to come into Klal Yisrael. Lahem, why does it say the word Lahem? Banim Ashivaldu Lahem, Dor Shlishi, why Lahem? Mehem Minei. Count from them. What does that mean, Mehem Minei? It means don't start counting the first generation from your children. The ger himself can count as himself the first generation, which means the second generation are his children, and the third generation are his grandchildren. Don't say count from the first born generation, which means from his children, and then the second generation are his grandchildren, and only his great grandchildren are mutter to marry into Klal Yisrael. No, the grandchildren of the ger himself may marry into Klal Yisrael. Now it says again in the pasuk Lahem, halach achar psulim. whenever you have two spouses, a man and a woman, one has a higher level of psul, one has a lower level of psul, always apply to the children the highest level of psul. We need lahem and we need yivold. Why? Because of Rachman Asher Yivoldu. If it only said Asher Yivoldu, which Yivoldu, if you remember, is what we used on the base to teach us that even women are usher. Why do I need a pasuk to say that even the women are usher if we already know from Lahem that you take the worst of the two? Obviously, they're both considered usher. So tomorrow you need them both. So tomorrow I'll tell you why. Because of Rachman Asher Yivoldu, if it only says Asher Yivoldu, let me make sure I'm reading it right. Is it Yivoldu? I want to make sure I read it right. It says Asher Yivoldu. That's right. Bottom Asher Yivoldu. It needs to say that right, because if it only said because of Rachman Asher Yivoldu, Hava Minim Mibenehem Mona. I would have thought that you're counting from their children. Therefore, because of Rachman Lahem, like we said earlier, to say that you start counting from the first generation. Because of Rachman Lahem, but if it only said Lahem and not Asher Yivoldu, I would have thought that the Mitris Beresh Shenis Gaira. What if you had a woman who was pregnant when she was Megayer? So I would have thought that since her child was Megayer with her child is still considered the first generation. He Nachat. Because of Rachman Asher Yivoldu, to tell you that even though she was Megayer with her child, once there's a birth involved, that's already considered the second generation. It says lahem by Mitzri to tell you that you pick the highest level of psul between the two spouses and apply to the child. And the same thing is with the mamzer. And we need both of them. Because of Rachman Hacha, if the Torah only told us by a Mitzri that you follow the highest level of psul, it's Mishum Debami Tipa Psula. Because the Mitzri is a Tipa Psula. The child is coming from a Pasala Tipa, its genes are coming from a Mitzri. Avul Mamzer, the Bami Tipa Kshera, but a Mamzer is created from two people who are kosher. Their union is what's not allowed. But each of the parents are kosher. Aim Eloi, I would have not necessarily said that you go according to the first member of your union. Because of Mamzer, and if it only said by Mamzer that you consider the worst parent, and that's how you taint the children, it's Mishum De'ein Ravi Lavi Bechal La'oila. Because a Mamzer is a very severe type of Isser, and Mamzer could never marry into Klal Yisrael. Avul Hacha, but when it comes to a Mitzri, where it's only 3 generations, Aim Eloi, you might think you don't go according to the worst common denominator. Shricha, therefore we know by all psulim, if there's the mother's puzzle and the father's puzzle, you apply the worst possible psul to the child. Amar Rabba Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan. Mitzri Sheni, Shenasa Mitris Rishayna, V'nosh Lishi. So right away you see Rabba Bar Chana in the name of Rabbi Yochanan is disagreeing with what we just said. Because he said if a Mitzri Sheni married a Mitris Rishayna, the child follows the Mitzri and he's considered a 3rd generation. The child does not follow his mother, who's 1st generation, which would make him in the 2nd generation. Rather, we follow the father, which makes this child into 3rd generation. Alma Kasovar, you see clearly from this psak of Rabbi Yochanan that Basar Didei Shadinule. You say that this child is following the yichas of his father, who's already 2nd generation, and not his mother, who's only 1st generation. Most of Rabbi Yosef had a kasha. Reb Tarfon had an ingenious solution in how to bring mamzerim back into the fold and allow them to marry back into Klal Yisrael. And he said, "Yechoilin mamzerim li tahir." I have a way where a mamzer can become tahir. Ketzat, how would we do this? Mamzer noso shivcha. If a mamzer marries a shivcha, havlad evet. The vlad is considered an evet because we said that the mother's yichus, if she is a shivcha, captures the yichus. The father is the baby is not the yachus after the father. How would a mamzer be able to marry a shivcha? A mamzer is a Jew. A Jewish man cannot marry a shivcha. So the eitzah is for the mamzer to get sold. He'll have to sell himself as an evet ivri, and if he sells himself as an evet ivri, then he could marry a shivcha. So mamzer could marry a shivcha, and then havlad evet, and then the vlad would be an evet. Shichroi, if the adoi now frees this evet, because this child is not the child of the mamzer, technically, we are in the siyachas after its mother is the shivcha. So therefore, he doesn't become a mamzer. He's just considered an evet. Shichroi, if the adoi frees this evet, nimsa ben chayrin, now this child is a ben chayrin who's not a mamzer. Alma, but you do see from here that Basar Gedasha didn't lay. We're not being the siyachas this child after its father who's a mamzer. Rather, we're being the siyachas this child after its mother who's a shivcha. So you have a raya against what we just said from Rabbi Yochanan, that you go Basar the father. So at Gemara Shani also, when it comes to a shivcha, things are very different. The pasuk says that when an evet ivri is boil a shivcha, which is one of his responsibilities as an evet, the children don't go to him. They're not considered his children. They're considered the children of the shivcha. So that's an exception. However, in the case of a mitri, sheni, you married a mitris, rishayna, there the yichus goes according to the father. So the poskim wanted to know, would this work today? Would this work today to be able to fix a mamzer? Get him to sell himself as an evet ivri to a person who bought a shivcha, to create some type of transaction where a person will buy a shivcha, because a shivcha knainis, and then buy this evet ivri who's a mamzer, let him live with this shivcha, and then his children will become from there. Will that work nowadays?
One second. What if the shivcha, we're assuming that the male is a mamzer. What if the shivcha herself, she's a mamzeres? She can.
Well, that's not what we're discussing. We're discussing if a person's a mamzer, a male, how he can fix his children. If a girl is a mamzeres, I don't know how she would fix her children. I don't know how that would work. Well, that's not what we're analyzing. What the Tarfon was discussing was a male mamzer. What solution does he have to fix his children? So the question is, would this work nowadays? So this question, I believe, was asked of one of the Gedolim of America. If I'm not mistaken, it was Rabbi Yosy Ber. And Rabbi Yosy Ber said, how could you do that? It's against Din da Malchus Adina. Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery. So you cannot use slavery anymore because slavery is illegal in America, and Al Din da Malchus Adina would be usher to use such a strategy.
I heard of a case, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but a Baal Tshuva who discovered he was a mamzer at the time that South Africans were coming to Eretz Yisrael, and they brought with them their maid, and the ruling was that the level of avdus of blacks in South Africa made it like she was an Evet Kanani, and freeing her, he could marry her and undo their mamzeres.
Well, she was considered a regular Evet Kanani.
Right.
So what halachic implication did it have? That when they free her, she's Jewish?
That he could marry her as a shivcha.
Who?
The mamzer. I'll see if I can.
Oh, there was actually such a case with the mamzer? They had to try her?
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Why didn't they tell the Rov that America is not the end of the world? I mean, there's other countries besides America where slavery is allowed.
I guess the shaila here was in America. Maybe they can go. Yeah, they could have went to another country. But I guess there's a discussion if they can do it in America.
If they're finding a mamzer and they're finding well, they didn't find a mamzer, but they're finding a shifcha, and they're finding all these ways, it's not too difficult to go to another country.
I'm just trying to find my headphones. I can't hear so well, so I'm going to grab my headphones. 1 second.
All right.
1 second.
Where do you have the camera mounted?
Sorry, I want to put my headphones on. I'll be able to hear better. There's too much car noise.
Oh, I thought it would be bouncing.
It's nice holding it still.
Wait 1 second. I'm just going to get my headphones hooked up to the computer.
You rented a car, so it's smooth.
Oh, it's just not as bouncy. Right?
It wouldn't be my car.
Computer mount. It's
You
got
wouldn't
a-
see him.
He didn't give a shear in a car. He did it
After 8 hours of driving.
It's pure adrenaline.
I know where he gets this clear from.
I can't hear anything.
He gets this clear from me. Because I gave Sheer in 2020.
Hey, let's go back there.
And what happened is, ever since then, it's never again.
Yes, you know, it's ironic. In the Gemara's time, they were talking about a mamzer.
Do you lose your
Yeah, your
speaker when you put the earphones in them?
unless he has double P's.
Right,
Yeah. Yosy, you're able to hear us?
I think I could hear you, but it's not coming through on my earpods. So let me take them off again. Let's see if I can get them connected again.
It's phone. Is that possible?
Are
It
you
shows
using
that
your,
it's connected.
yeah.
Are you using your phone?
I just found out.
No, I'm using my computer, and I tried connecting my earpods to them. so
You
that
have
I-
to change the sound settings in Zoom.
Oh, that's what I have to do. Thank you for reminding me. I connected it, but I didn't do it too. That's right. Thank you. Let's see if I can find them.
The computer has to connect to the earpods.
Speaker.
Find it.
Oh, here we go. Perfect. Okay, I think now I can hear you better.
Yeah, so
Oh, gewaltig.
Yossi, in the Gemara's time, the guy became a mamzer after, and then they try to mishadach him with a shikza. Heinte Ketziden, the guy first marries the shikza, then he becomes a mamzer.
Very good. Very good. I know a lot of people who are mamzers and they don't marry shikshas to become a mamzer. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. So Reb Tarfon had this eitzah of mamzerim litar, but you have a rye from there that it goes bust to the mother. So the Gemara says that's different. By a shivcha, we follow the yichus of the mother. So Zok the Gemara weiter. Zok the Gemara weiter. Mosav Rav, Rav Akasha. Omer Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said over that he had a friend that we learned about already before, Minyamin the Ger. Minyamin was a Ger Mitzri Hayali. Chaver, he was my friend, Mitalmidi Rabbi Kiva. He was a friend of mine from Rabbi Kiva's yeshiva. The Amar, and he used to say, Ani Mitzri Rishon, I'm a Mitzri first generation. Vinasasi Mitzris Rishon. I married a Mitzris who's first generation. Ozi Livni Mitzris Shnia. I'm going to marry my son off to a second generation Mitzris. Kidei Shihei Ben Beni Royu Lovi Bakal. Zok the Gemara. If you don't act where the mother's holding, you only focus on where the father is, and he's second generation, then Afilu Rishonim Nami. Why should he limit his pool of women for his son to second generation mitzvahs, even if he marries a first generation mitzvahs? According to what we're saying, his child, the grandchild, will still be third generation. So Gemara, you're right. Ha'amar le Rabbi Yochanan l'tana tani rishayna. In fact, Rabbi Yochanan corrected this brisa, and he said that the story was, in fact, that Minyamin Ger said that my son, who's the second generation Mitzri, will even be able to marry a first generation Mitzris because you follow him, and it's going to be his child will still be third generation. Kiyasher Rav Dimi Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Dimi had a very difference of opinion about what Rabbi Yochanan said from Rabbi Baravuna, I think it was. And he quoted that from Yochanan differently. He said, Mitri Sheni Shanasa Mitris Rishayna, Bena Sheni Havoy. The Bena is a Sheni, which means you do follow the mother. Alma Basar Imesh Adinule. From Abdimi's Nusach, you see that he holds that Rabbi Yochanan said you do follow the mother's yichus. Amarle Abaye, if you follow the mother's yichus, I mean you're saying that the vlad is like part of the mother. The word for that is uber yerachimai. By you saying that the child follows the mother, you're like saying uber yerachimai. Amarle Abaye, Elahad Amar Rabbi Yochanan, hifrish chatas muberes. What if you set aside for a korban chatas that you had to bring an animal that was pregnant, Yolda, and it gave birth? So now you have two animals here. Rotza mischaper ba, rotza mischaper bevlada. You have a choice. You could use either one because you don't say that it's one animal that was given and now the animal gave birth and it's one that chatois and mesis that have to be killed. Rather, you say that we always perceive the uber to be a separate, independent, distinct animal, and you say that what the person meant when he designated this pregnant mother as his korban, he meant from day one that I want one and I want bachrayich, meaning I want a guarantee. So I'm going to give two animals, whichever one I end up bringing for the actual korban will be the korban, and the other one we're going to sell, we'll let it get a mum and we'll sell it. And that was his initial intent. So Zok Gemara, Amrit b'Shleima, Uber lav yerchimayu. If you hold the Uber is not considered part of the mother, then this halacha makes sense. It's like you originally set aside two animals for your korban, so you're sure one will still be available. It's an insurance policy. Yosy said, what's the halacha if you set aside two animals for your chatas, even though you only need one? Allah is mischaper ba'achas man. You can pick any animal you want to be the one that's brought as a korban. And the second one, you'll let it pasture till it gets a mum. So that only works if you say ober laver chimai. But if you want to say that you follow the yichus of the mother, Rabbi Yochanan said you follow the mother's situation. If you're going to say that we look at the ober like it's part of its mother, then it's considered a vlat chatos, which is you donated a female animal, it became pregnant and it gave birth. That animal that's born, the halach is it's one of the chatois hamesais. You have to leave it to die. And vlat chatos misa azil, and it's not yirachiyistay. Ishtik, after this question that was asked on Rabdimi, Rabbi Abaye challenged Rabdimi with this question. Rabdimi didn't have an answer. Amalei, then Abaye offered an answer to his own question. And he said, Dilma shani hacha, dichsiv ashayivoldu, hakazav talei beleda. Maybe the only reason why you will say that you go by the mother is because it says ashayivoldu. So it says by the mitzvahs, banim ashayivoldu lahem. So maybe normally you say uber lav yerachimai. But when it comes to mitzvah, the Torah especially says ashayivoldu to say you follow the mother. Because of Tali Beleda. Amalei, Rabdimi, when he heard how Abaye answered his own kasha to support Rabdimi, Rabdimi said, Karkavna, wow, Abaye, do you have a sharp head? Are you a genius? What a gewaltige pshat. Chazi say l'reishech ve'ni amudei ki amar Rabbi Yochanan l'shmaitzer. I saw that your head was amongst the big pillars, meaning you were there sitting with the titans of the Bismedrash, schmoozing and learning. You were there speaking to the big guys. Imagine you're sitting, listening to the Rosh Hashiva Shir, and you're standing up there with the veterans, schmoozing and learning them. You know, usually the new Bachim there, they don't know what's flying. They see these older guys talking about the Shir. They don't even know what it's talking about. But I saw you, Abaye, you were from the titans, schmoozing. I see you know Rabbi Yochanan's Shir well. Taima, the Kasev Asher Yivold. Why do you follow the mother? By the mitzri, because it says Asher Yivold. Haba'alma basar avu ashadinalei. But normally you go basar the father. Elahad Amarava. Rava said, Nachrish muberish in Iskaya. You had a regular goya, nothing to do with a mitzri. A regular goya that was pregnant, and then she became a geiris while she was pregnant. So she toiveled. Is the baby inside her considered to have toiveled? So the halach is b'na ein shricha tvila. The baby does not need tvila. It's part of her. And by ein tzarich tvila, why wouldn't it need tvila? It must be because uber yerachimai. If uber yerachimai, it takes us back to the kasha that we had before by hipper shtechatois, because we're trying to say that uber lav yerachimai. But if it's uber lav yerachimai, how could the tefillah on the mother be good for the child? So to Gemara, we know what's a chatzitza. If the chatzitza covers roiv of your body and you're makbid not to have it, but if it's ruboy ve'enei makbid alav or miut makbid alav, that wouldn't be a chatzitza. V'ha, so let's turn over to the blot and then we'll just finish this line and we'll stop. V'ha. So therefore, since it's only midrabanan, since it's only chatzitza midrabanan, maybe the rabbanon will allow this fluid to go through. So when do you say a chatzitza is only asam midrabanan? That is the roiv. Avol kulai chaytzitz. But if it's the whole here, you have the uber that's in the mother. It's not a roiv chatzitza. It's kulai chatzitza. He's totally contained within his mother. He's not coming into contact with any water. For sure, that's a chatzitza. So how is it that the uber doesn't need tefillah? The Gemara is shiny uber, the haini Rabbi say. The reason why the mother is not a chatzitza for the baby inside her is because he's in his cocoon. He's exactly the way he's supposed to be wrapped. When something's in the way it's supposed to be wrapped, it's not a chatzitza. If you toivel a nut and the nut is in the shell, that's not a chatzitza. That's how it comes. That's how it comes wrapped. Therefore, it's not a kasha. Even if you hold uber lav yerachimahu, nevertheless, the mother still wouldn't be a chatzitza because that's how the baby comes wrapped. Okay, it's 6:55, so we better stop here, and we'll be mamshech tomorrow. Now I'm a half a block behind, but we will catch up. Have a wonderful day. Hatzlucha Rabba.
Safe trip.
Thank you very much.
We started to do this 7 o'clock, and it's good. I show up there.
Yeah, it's really good how I started.
Yosy Zalman,
Yes.
did you hear about Shulam Hersh's Vart?
No.
Never told it to you? Do you have a minute?
Sure.
More than a minute.
I don't have a minute. No problem. Shulam Hersh once was asked a kasha, how is it that you have to always stand for a Sefer Torah whenever the Sefer Torah comes out of the Oren until the Sefer Torah gets put onto the bima? Yet we see that by Simchas Torah, the Sefer Torah are out of the Oren, they're not on the bima, and everybody's sitting down.
Right.
So this is the question that they asked him.
I think you told me, he said, because that's how they belong.
Right, so that's where the Sefer Torah. So now that you said that something doesn't need tefillah when it's
And the baby is where, no, it needs tefillah, but the mother is not a chatzitza because that's how the baby is supposed to be.
Right, so I'm just wondering if I can apply that over here. Since the Sefer Torah is wrapped in the correct way, so the Sefer Torah is either wrapped in the Oren or the Sefer Torah is wrapped in the person's arms, right? You wouldn't have to stand up for it. I'm just trying to see if the